It begins with a small, unremarkable coin, a single pound resting in the palm of a hand. It carries almost no weight, almost no meaning on its own, and yet it has the power to summon something familiar, comforting, and strangely revealing about the world we have built around ourselves. A cheeseburger, warm, soft-edged, wrapped in thin paper crinkling like the whisper of a secret, exchanged for less than what many would tip a busker on the high street. A gesture so small that most people never pause long enough to ask how such a thing is possible. How this object, made from ingredients that were once alive, grown, transported, processed, shaped, cooked, assembled, marketed, and delivered, could emerge from the machinery of modern life at the price of a single pound. The story hides in places we do not often look. It hides in fields before dawn where cattle breathe out slow clouds into the cold morning air. It hides in the hum of processing plants, in the neon glow above late-night fast food counters, in menus that promise familiarity and escape in equal measure. A $1 cheeseburger is not merely food. It is a compact expression of an economy that has learned to stretch, twist, compress, and disguise value until the final number printed on a screen feels too small to question. And yet behind that number lies a world of history, of risk, of strange incentives, of victories and losses woven slowly through decades. To understand the economics behind it, one must move far beyond the fluorescent simplicity of the restaurant itself. One must begin in the quiet, unnoticed corners of the 20th century, where the origins of cheap fast food were shaped by sweeping changes in how people lived, worked, and imagined convenience. It was a time when the post-war world, swollen with optimism and anxiety in equal parts, started to re-engineer life into something predictable, repeatable, mass-produced. Efficiency became a kind of mythic pursuit, and the humble burger, once a diner staple, once cooked by hand with all the irregularities of human touch, became the perfect vessel for a new industrial dream. As cities grew and commutes lengthened, people craved speed. As supermarkets expanded and household budgets tightened, companies learned the art of shaving off pennies without ever appearing to cheapen the experience. Beef, bread, cheese, none of these alone could explain the final price. It was the system behind them, a system that rewarded scale more than craft, repetition more than originality, consistency more than flavor. And so the cheeseburger evolved, bit by bit, into something that represented not the quality of its ingredients, but the vast machinery required to deliver it cheaply and endlessly. A pound is not simply the cost of the burger, it is the cost of a promise that the consumer will return again and again, drawn by the comfort of knowing exactly what they will receive. This promise, this psychological contract, sits at the heart of the economics. A fast food chain is not in the business of selling one burger. It is in the business of selling millions. And so the one cheeseburger is not designed to profit directly. It is designed to beckon, to reassure, to lower the threshold between hesitation and hunger. But the deeper truth lies in what the price does not reveal. Behind the counter, a hidden choreography unfolds. The slicing of costs into thinner and thinner pieces, the negotiations that compress supply chains into tight corridors of efficiency, the careful balancing act between affordability and margin. A chain can sell a cheeseburger for a pound because every part of the system is built to make that pound stretch impossibly far. And so the story drifts back to the cattle once again. For many of the cows raised in the sprawling landscapes of the modern meat industry, the journey from pasture to patty is shaped by forces far larger than the farms themselves. Over time, government subsidies tilted the playing field, lowering the effective cost of feed, while encouraging large-scale operations. Technological advancements made it possible to raise more cattle with fewer people, pushing down labor expenses across the supply chain. Transport networks improved, refrigeration became cheaper, and suddenly the world could move beef with a speed and reliability that would have baffled farmers a century earlier. Each step reduced the cost behind the burger, but each step also added another layer to the story, another subtle twist in the long chain of decisions that would eventually bring the price to a single pound. And as costs fell, expectations grew. Consumers learned to equate fast food with affordability, and affordability became a cornerstone of competition. The cheeseburger, once merely a menu item, became a strategic weapon in a pricing war that never truly ended. But the economics reaches even further, into the psychology of choice. The one cheeseburger works because it feels safe. It feels like a small indulgence that asks for almost nothing in return. For many customers, it carries the weight of nostalgia. Childhood meals on busy days, late-night stops with friends, the simple comfort of something warm at a time when life felt too chaotic. Companies understand this deeply. They know that the low price taps into a kind of emotional gravity, pulling people toward the counter, with the promise of affordability and familiarity. And so the pound remains fixed, a quiet signal that the world, despite its complexity, can still offer something simple. Yet simplicity is an illusion, an aesthetic wrapped around a labyrinth. Because in truth, that pound is supported by many others, by the purchases that follow, by the drinks with high margins, by the fries whose cost-to-price ratio is among the most profitable in the restaurant. The one cheeseburger is not designed to stand alone. It is designed to usher the customer into a broader ecosystem, where each decision nudges the margins upward. In dimly lit boardrooms, executives discuss these margins not with fanfare but with precision. They know exactly how many customers choose the cheeseburger as an addition rather than a standalone meal. They know how many people upgrade their drink, how many choose to add a second item, how the ebb and flow of a single pound can ripple through their entire financial model. This is not accidental. It is the result of a carefully crafted dance between pricing, psychology, and scale. Yet beneath this calculation lies something quieter, something older, the evolving relationship between value and perception. The cheeseburger did not become cheap simply because ingredients became cheaper. It became cheap because society learned to value convenience as highly as nourishment. It became cheap because mass production reshaped expectations. It became cheap because we stopped questioning how something so complex could cost so little. And now, as the wrapper crinkles once more in someone's hand, the story pauses just for a moment, in the space between that pound and the world that made it possible. The story deepens when we step inside the walls of the processing plants that transform raw materials into standardized components of a global menu. These buildings stand far from the public eye, their presence marked only by the distant hum drifting across quiet industrial estates. Inside, the air is thick with the rhythm of machinery, conveyor belts carrying pieces of beef that were once muscle and movement, shaped now into uniform discs that will soon become patties. Workers move with steady precision, their movements practiced, their roles defined by the relentless demand for consistency. It is here, among the stainless steel chutes and the low roar of refrigeration units, that cost is carved away fraction by fraction. Efficiency is not a strategy, it is a culture, almost a doctrine. From the grinding of the meat to the quick flash freezing that locks each patty into its predetermined identity, the system is designed not to waste time, space, or labor. Every second represents a cost. Every deviation, a potential ripple that could disturb the fragile arithmetic required for those final menu prices. The men and women on the floor understand this. They are part of an unseen network of discipline and repetition, their contribution feeding into a chain of events that ends with a young person standing in front of a glowing menu board, choosing a $1 cheeseburger without thinking twice. But this is only one node in a larger constellation. The bun, too, has its journey, beginning not in the bakery but in fields where wheat sways under the shifting sky. It is harvested, milled, sifted, and shipped to facilities that specialize in producing bread built not for artisanal pleasure, but for durability, uniformity, and cost. These buns are engineered to behave the same way across thousands of kitchens, resisting staleness long enough to travel vast distances. Their gentle sweetness is calibrated to trigger a sense of comfort so subtle, so familiar, that the taste becomes inseparable from the experience of fast food itself. Cheese, although only a thin square in the final assembly, carries a story layered with quiet complexity. It is not truly cheese in the traditional sense, not aged in cool cellars, not shaped by the slow affection of craft. It is designed instead for predictability, to melt quickly yet hold its form, to taste mildly enough to please the widest audience possible, to cost mere pennies per slice when produced at scale. It is a symbol of the compromises that define the economics of the one burger, not inferior by accident, but engineered to meet a standard of affordability that has come to feel inevitable. Each of these ingredients reflects a decision made somewhere far away from the restaurant counters where customers queue. These decisions often carry a sense of detachment, made in offices filled with financial models and procurement strategies. But behind every cost-saving measure lies a series of pressures: global commodity prices fluctuating with the weather, trade agreements shifting the terms of imports, labor markets tightening or loosening with political tides. The price of the cheeseburger is a fragile equilibrium, maintained by companies that must constantly forecast and adapt to worlds that few customers notice. The burger's journey, however, still has another layer: the kitchens of the restaurants themselves. These stations are choreographed like miniature factories, each surface and tool optimized for speed. The employees follow sequences honed through years of iteration: a tap to release the patty, a timed press to sear it, a slide to the holding area where it waits beneath warm lights that preserve texture for minutes that matter more to the bottom line than customers realize. Every action reduces cost, and every reduction in cost protects the magic of that $1 price point. Yet even here, the economics is not complete. For the restaurant, the burger is not just food. It is a lure. Often sold at minimal profit or even at a slight loss, the cheeseburger draws customers in with its familiarity, acting almost like the front door to a larger house filled with higher margin items. Fries, for example, quietly shoulder the burden of profitability. Their ingredients are inexpensive, their preparation quick, their appeal nearly universal. Customer who walks in for a $1 burger rarely leaves with only that burger, and companies have built entire pricing structures around this reliable pattern of behavior. Still, beneath these strategies lies something more human: the quiet, unspoken transaction between time, money, and emotion. The one cheeseburger offers a moment of simplicity in a world that often feels overwhelming. It provides a predictable comfort to the office worker rushing between meetings, to the student stretching a thin budget, to the tired parent trying to satisfy hungry children at the end of a long day. In this way, the economics extends beyond spreadsheets and balance sheets. It becomes entangled with the rhythms of ordinary life, the small rituals that keep people grounded. But this simplicity masks a tension brewing beneath the surface. As wages rise and inflation presses into every corner of the economy, the cost structure that once supported the $1 price point begins to strain. Companies face pressure from all sides: suppliers raising prices, energy costs climbing, labor shortages forcing wage increases. The burger, once comfortably nestled in the realm of the affordable, becomes a battleground where strategies must evolve to keep the illusion alive. Some chains absorb short-term losses, hoping that loyalty and high-volume sales will compensate. Others shrink portion sizes in ways too subtle for customers to notice. Sometimes the price remains the same while ingredients shift imperceptibly. A slight reduction in cheese thickness, a minor adjustment in bun recipe, a sourcing change that trims expenses just enough to keep the books balanced. These changes accumulate quietly, forming a hidden archive of compromise that few will ever see, though nearly everyone consumes. The world continues to move, and with it the expectations of consumers shift as well. The cheeseburger, small, simple, inexpensive, becomes a symbol not only of value, but of something more fragile: the belief that some things in life can remain unchanged, even as everything else transforms. And companies lean into this belief, understanding that emotional familiarity can be more powerful than any advertising campaign. The one burger does not merely satisfy hunger, it reassures. Yet reassurance is not always sustainable. As the story unfolds deeper into the forces shaping global food economics, the stability of that pound becomes more precarious, resting upon a web of trade-offs stretched thin by a world increasingly unpredictable. The tension grows almost invisibly, like a faint tremor beneath the floorboards of a quiet house. To most people, the one cheeseburger seems immune to the shifting pressures of the world, stubbornly unchanged even as headlines speak of inflation, droughts, geopolitical tensions, and supply chain disruptions. But beneath the surface, each of these forces presses against the delicate machinery that keeps the burger tethered to its improbable price. The story drifts now into the wide, inhospitable landscapes, where climate is not a background detail, but a strict, unforgiving authority. Weather shapes economies long before numbers reach spreadsheets. Prolonged heat dries out pastures, forcing farmers to spend more on feed. Heavy rains drown crops, escalating the cost of grain. Storms disrupt transport routes. Droughts weaken soil, reducing yields across continents. And though we rarely connect these distant events to the menu boards on our high streets, they ripple outward, tightening the margins that corporations rely on to maintain what seems like an everyday bargain. Cattle ranchers feel these pressures first. Their world is a long-term one, measured not by quarterly earnings but by seasons, by the slow growth of animals whose lives and diets depend on fragile ecological patterns. When costs rise here, the effects take months or years to filter into the final price of beef. But they always arrive eventually. And each arrival is a quiet tap against the glass window of the one burger, a warning that something behind the illusion of simplicity is shifting. Then there are the forces of global trade. Beef does not travel alone. It moves within a vast system shaped by treaties, tariffs, currency fluctuations, and political relationships. A disruption in one part of the world can alter prices everywhere, as markets adjust to scarcity, competition, or regulation. Bread, cheese, packaging, even the cardboard boxes used for transport. All of it is touched by the invisible hands of global economics. And yet customers continue to step into restaurants expecting the same predictable exchange. One coin, one burger, unchanged by the tumults outside. In corporate boardrooms, this expectation weighs heavily. Executives pore over graphs, running simulations that project the future of their low-priced items under various scenarios. They examine regions, promotions, sales curves, and demographic patterns. The one cheeseburger is not just a product, it is an anchor for customer perception. Raising its price risks a psychological break, a subtle but powerful shift that might send people searching for alternatives or questioning the brand's commitment to value. And so the burger becomes a symbol of steadiness, even as the world drifts toward uncertainty. To protect this symbol, companies turn increasingly to scale, growing larger, integrating supply chains, negotiating deals that only the biggest corporations can secure. Scale becomes both shield and sword, enabling them to maintain low prices by leveraging volumes so massive that small efficiencies multiply into significant savings. But scale also comes with vulnerabilities. When one link falters, a shortage of workers in a key processing plant, a disruption in a shipping route, a regulatory change, the size of the operation amplifies the impact. These vulnerabilities became starkly visible during moments of global disruption, when supply chains buckled and sent shockwaves through every corner of consumer goods. The cost of maintaining a $1 burger shot upward. Some restaurants quietly removed the item from certain locations. Others kept it as a loss leader, absorbing the blow in hopes of preserving goodwill. But behind every decision was the same quiet question. How long can an economy built on thin margins sustain a product so aggressively priced? Yet despite these pressures, the burger remains, wrapped in its familiar paper, warm and reassuring. And perhaps the most compelling part of the story lies not in its ingredients or its price, but in its place within society. For millions, this burger is not a luxury. It is a lifeline, a reliable, inexpensive meal in a world where affordability is increasingly fragile. Students, low-wage workers, travelers, families, they depend on the existence of something predictable and cheap. The one burger carries a cultural weight that extends far beyond its nutritional content. This creates a paradox. The more society depends on the burger's affordability, the harder companies must work to keep it affordable, even when it strains their own margins. The burger becomes a kind of social pact, maintained by an industry whose motives are profit-driven, but whose actions inadvertently support a public expectation of low-cost convenience. And in this pact, something deeply revealing emerges about modern life, the value we place on access, on ease, on small comforts that can be bought without a second thought. But the story is not without its darker threads. Low prices often mask costs that are simply shifted elsewhere, costs absorbed by the environment, by workers, by animals, by small-scale farms that cannot compete with industrial efficiency. The price on the menu board may be £1, but the true cost is dispersed across a world whose fragments do not neatly fit into the narrative of affordability. These invisible costs accumulate quietly, forming a shadow ledger beneath the official one, recording impacts not tallied in financial statements. The workers in fast food restaurants, too, form part of this hidden dimension. Many earn modest wages, performing repetitive tasks under time pressure, their shifts governed by algorithms designed to anticipate customer flow minute by minute. The economics of the one burger depend on labor that is both affordable and flexible. The individuals who assemble these meals, often young or working multiple jobs, become moving parts in a system that seeks efficiency above all else. Their experiences, the pace, the demands, the stakes, rarely appear in conversations about the burger's price. Yet without them, the equation collapses. Their experiences, the pace, the demands, the stakes, rarely appear in conversations about the burger's price. Yet without them, the equation collapses. Yet for all its complexity, the cheeseburger remains what it appears to be: a simple meal. This is the quiet magic of the system, an intricate global web compressed into something warm and familiar, handed across a counter in seconds. Customers do not need to understand the machinery behind it. The financial pressures, the climate impacts, the trade negotiations, the labor conditions. These details dissolve the moment the first bite is taken. The burger succeeds because it allows people to forget, even briefly, the complexities that shadow modern life. But shadows lengthen, and as the economics of food continue to tighten, the question becomes unavoidable. How long can the illusion hold? How long can a single pound stand against the weight of global forces that show no sign of easing? The answer lies ahead, in the part of the story where the system begins to encounter its limits. The first signs of strain appear not in boardrooms or supply depots, but in the quiet murmurs of customers who begin to notice the smallest of changes. A burger that feels slightly smaller than before, cheese that melts just a bit differently, a bun whose softness fades more quickly between bites. These are not accidents. They are the result of delicate recalibrations made behind the scenes, each adjustment preserving the outward promise while quietly shifting the substance within. Such changes rarely provoke outrage. They are too subtle, too incremental. But they reveal a truth the industry tries to hide, that stretching a pound to cover a burger is becoming a tighter and more precarious act. The profit margins, once thin but stable, now feel like the last strands of a rope under tension. And as companies work to preserve the illusion of affordability, they begin to compromise in ways that would have been unthinkable decades earlier. The story moves now into the offices where financial analysts run models late into the night, tracking projections that seem to slide further away from the certainty they once offered. They examine trends in beef prices, wage data, energy costs, shipping expenses. Each variable shapes the trajectory of the cheeseburger's future. Some nights the models show resilience. Other nights they deliver warnings, subtle at first, then increasingly sharp, that the system supporting the one burger cannot endure indefinitely without change. Executives debate quietly whether to raise the price. The decision is not a simple one. The one cheeseburger is more than an item on a menu. It is an anchor for brand identity, a beacon for customers navigating their way through economic hardship, a psychological threshold beneath which the product feels universally attainable. Raising the price is not just a financial act. It is an emotional rupture that risks unsettling millions of people whose routines, budgets, and memories are tangled up in the simple ritual of ordering something familiar for pocket change. And so they wait, they postpone, they adjust other parts of the business, hoping to buy more time. They experiment with digital promotions, trying to shift costs to other areas. They refine supply chains, automate tasks once done by hand, re-engineer packaging to shave fractions of pennies off each unit. But every solution is temporary, like patching cracks in a wall that continues to settle under its own weight. Meanwhile, the world outside grows more unpredictable. Inflation rises and falls in restless waves. Energy markets convulse. Political tensions ripple through trade networks. Droughts tighten their grip on agricultural regions that once supplied the backbone of the burger's ingredients. Storms erase harvests in a single day. Each event seems distant until its effects arrive at the restaurant door. The one-tour cheeseburger begins to resemble not a bargain, but a monument, a strangely enduring relic from an economic era that is slipping away. And yet it endures because people want it to endure. Because it has become part of daily life, woven into the cultural fabric in ways that exceed its humble form. For some, it represents childhood memories. For others, a small but meaningful refuge from financial strain. For many, it is simply a familiar comfort in a world that feels increasingly uncertain. This emotional gravity is one of the forces companies rely on most. They know that value is not just a calculation of cost versus price. It is a perception, a feeling, a promise. And as long as the burger feels like a symbol of stability, its true economics can remain obscured, defended by customer loyalty strong enough to cushion small shifts in strategy. But beneath the marketing, the system grows more rigid. The farms that once benefited from subsidies now face rising costs of their own. Machinery, fuel, labor, land. The factories that process meat and bake buns struggle with staffing, inflation, regulatory pressures. The transport networks that deliver ingredients are strained by fuel prices and global disruptions. It becomes harder with each passing year to hold the line at that 1 pound mark. In the kitchens where the burgers are assembled, employees sense the shift as well. They feel the tightening efficiency demands, the increased pace as companies attempt to counterbalance rising costs with higher throughput. Their work intensifies in small but noticeable ways: shorter breaks, leaner staffing during busy hours, more precise performance monitoring. The unseen human cost of the one burger grows, even as its price stays frozen. And still the customers flow through the doors. Students, families, night shift workers, travelers. People seeking something warm and familiar. People who rarely consider the labyrinth behind their purchase. They hold the burger without realizing that it is a quiet miracle of logistics and compromise, of scaled production, and carefully managed perception. The turning point comes not with a single crisis, but with an accumulation of tensions that can no longer be absorbed. A spike in commodity prices that lasts longer than expected, a labor shortage in a critical sector, a new regulation increasing the cost of energy or packaging, a dip in consumer spending that forces companies to rethink their promotional strategies. These events converge like threads, winding slowly into a knot, tightening until the system struggles to breathe. Behind closed doors, discussions begin to shift from "how do we maintain the price" to "what happens if we don't?" The emotional weight of the one burger is debated alongside spreadsheets and forecasts. Executives know that raising the price will spark disappointment, even outrage. But they also understand that the longer they wait, the more dramatic the eventual change will be. And so the inevitability grows. Not announced, not acknowledged publicly, but felt internally like a tide that can no longer be resisted. In the quiet spaces between these decisions, a deeper reflection emerges, one that stretches beyond economics. What does it say about a society that needs a meal to cost a single pound? What expectations have we built? What dependencies? What stories have we told ourselves about value, convenience, and accessibility? The one cheeseburger becomes a mirror held up to the world, reflecting not only the ingenuity of industry, but the vulnerabilities of modern living. And as that mirror sharpens, the story moves toward its final turn, into the place where economics meets emotion, where the future of the burger becomes something both uncertain and revealing. The moment of change does not arrive with fanfare. It comes quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the soft shift in weather that signals the arrival of a new season. A few restaurants update their menu boards. A digital sign flickers with a slightly altered price. The familiar 1 is replaced by something else, 1.19 perhaps, or 1.29. Small enough to be rationalized, large enough to mark the end of an era. And though many customers notice, few truly grasp the full weight of what has happened. For the companies, this decision is not a victory, but a reluctant surrender, a recognition that the economics of the past can no longer support the expectations of the present. The one cheeseburger, that improbable miracle forged by scale, efficiency, compromise, and relentless optimization, has finally reached the edge of its viability. The world around it has evolved too quickly, too unpredictably. And in that evolution, the burger has become a casualty of forces beyond any single company's control. Yet even as the price rises, the story continues. Customers still order it. They grumble, perhaps trade quiet complaints across tables or online threads, but they continue to buy. Because the burger's meaning has never been entirely tied to its price. It is tied instead to something more intimate, the feeling of familiarity, the comfort of routine, the subtle reassurance that some things in life can be counted on, even as others drift out of reach. But with the rise in price comes a new awareness, faint at first but growing. The recognition that affordability is not a permanent feature of the world, but a fragile construction. The cheeseburger becomes a reminder of how much effort, compromise, and invisible cost goes into creating something that feels simple. And with that recognition comes a quiet shift in perspective. A sense that the conveniences we take for granted are supported by vast, intricate systems whose endurance is never guaranteed. In time, the old $1 price becomes a memory. People recall it the way previous generations recalled the cost of bread or petrol decades before, with a mixture of nostalgia and disbelief. A symbol of a moment in history when the world seemed able to compress complexity into a single, affordable meal. Children who grew up seeing the price as immutable now reflect on it as adults, recognizing how extraordinary it truly was. Meanwhile, the industry adapts. Some chains search for new ways to anchor customer perception, introducing alternative value items or limited-time promotions. Others invest aggressively in automation, hoping that machines can reduce labor costs enough to allow certain low-price items to return. Some experiment with reformulating ingredients, leaning deeper into processed efficiencies. But none can fully replicate the peculiar balance that once made the one cheeseburger possible. And so the burger transforms into something else. Not just a menu item, but a historical marker. A quiet testament to a period defined by an unshakable belief in scalability, in optimization, in the power of industrial systems to make life easier and cheaper for everyone. It becomes a story about confidence and fragility, about human ingenuity and the limits of economic illusion. But deeper still, beneath all these shifts, lies a tender truth that threads through the entire narrative. The cheeseburger mattered not because it was cheap, but because it was accessible. Because it symbolized the idea that pleasure, however small, should be within reach. It stood as a reassurance to millions that in a world of rising bills and shrinking wages, a moment of warmth and comfort could still be purchased for a coin pulled from the bottom of a pocket. When that era fades, something subtle is lost. Not just affordability, but the sense of shared cultural anchoring. The one cheeseburger belonged equally to everyone. The teenager on a limited allowance, the pensioner stretching a weekly budget, the exhausted nurse grabbing a meal between shifts, the student surviving on part-time wages. Its disappearance from the realm of the pound gently fractures that shared space, creating a world where even small comforts begin to drift out of step with the realities people face. Yet the story does not end in lament. Instead, it shifts into reflection. A wide, slow breath that invites a deeper understanding of the forces shaping modern life. Because the true lesson of the one cheeseburger is not about a price point at all. It is about the invisible threads that bind global economies to everyday experience. It is about the ways in which entire industries stretch themselves to meet the expectations of a public that has been taught to equate convenience with stability. It is about the emotional weight carried by simple things, The burger becomes a symbol of a broader question, one without easy answers. What do we expect the world to provide for us, and what are we willing to accept as the hidden cost of that provision? In a time when supply chains are strained, when climate shifts disrupt harvests, when inflation tugs relentlessly at the corners of household budgets, the story of the one cheeseburger becomes a story about the fragility of value itself. It invites the viewer to imagine the vast machinery required to make such a price possible. The farms, the factories, the ships, the warehouses, the workers across continents whose lives intersect briefly with the journey of a single disposable meal. It asks them to consider how many compromises had to align perfectly for that pound to be enough. And it suggests quietly that this alignment was always temporary. Still, the cheeseburger endures. Changed, yes, more expensive, certainly, but present, a familiar shape in a world that continues to move and reshape itself. It no longer carries the mythic aura of its former price, yet it retains the emotional resonance that made it iconic. People still reach for it during late-night cravings, during moments of stress or celebration, during ordinary days when something small and warm feels necessary. And perhaps that is the final truth the story offers, that value is not purely economic, and never truly was. It is emotional, contextual, shaped by memory as much as by cost. The one cheeseburger may be gone, but the comfort it once symbolized remains woven into the fabric of everyday life. As the documentary reaches its end, the camera would drift outward, from the burger to the restaurant to the city streets illuminated by the glow of signs and passing cars. Outward still to the supply trucks on highways, the fields in early dawn light, the factories humming under metal roofs, the boardrooms where numbers whisper of futures not yet certain. Outward until the world becomes vast again, its systems interconnected and complex, its stories threaded through the simplest of objects. And somewhere in that expanse, the memory of the one cheeseburger lingers, a small artifact of a remarkable economic moment, a reminder of how deeply our lives are shaped by things we rarely pause to consider. Its story is not only about food or business or affordability. It is about the hidden architecture of modern society, the fragility of convenience, and the quiet wonder that a single pound could conjure something so layered, so improbable, and so deeply human. And as the lights dim and the narration falls to a whisper, the question remains softly in the air, unresolved yet resonant. What else in our world carries such unseen stories, disguised beneath the comfort of the ordinary, waiting to be understood before they too slip quietly into memory?